Right. So, welcome everybody to the next installment of our little interview series here about vocabulary, how some of my favorite players and teachers approach this really important topic that we're all trying to deal with in the practice room. And today I've got one of my favorite saxophone players and favorite people, Jeff Ellwood. So, Jeff, thanks for doing this so much.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. It's good to talk to you again, and let's hope that we can dig into some good stuff.
Absolutely. So, my first question, this is something that I ask everybody. Is vocabulary something that you are working on in the practice room, on a daily basis?
It is. I think most of my practice generally is just kind of picking up the horn and just trying to free associate um, things. I have a notebook that I always keep next to me that is always getting little ideas put down in it, fragments of ideas that I might come across in a practice session. And then, what I'll do is then sometimes I like to put the horn down, just look at the fragment on paper, and then try to see if I can flush out the material any further. Um, I think a lot of the vocabulary that I work on is, I think my approach to improvisation is melodic in a sense. I really try to think about melodicism. Not that I don't like to play angular and outside of the key and all that kind of stuff, but I also like to play pretty over chords.
Mm,
And by doing that, I want to make sure that I have some strong melodic material that I could then transfer to any tune. And I think a lot of times we look at licks and vocabulary as these like, chromatic 2/5 licks, and then we learn all this kind of stuff. Melodies can also be, why can't we have a source of melodic vocabulary that we also carry? It's this kind of like this mystery thing. We work on these hip lines, but then we don't work on melodic content. And,
mm.
I think a lot of times we have to look at like, where does that melodic content come from? And I think that melodic content we still have to draw from the source material of all the things that we should be practicing really kind of on a daily basis. So I think, yes, I do work on vocabulary, but then I pick up my horn. A lot of times I just pick a key for the day and I just start to noodle. But I also need to do some like fundamental exercises at the same time, right? All the things that we should be working on: scales and thirds, diatonic triads, diatonic seventh chords, and not to say that we don't come up with other little scale fragment ideas that we practice that also get kind of put in this lexicon of ideas that we can use. And, a lot of my approach to doing this stuff is kind of all from the Gary Campbell, Rick Margitza expansions, right, where we play thirds and we flip them and we play them up and we play them down, and we can play two up and one down, or
Right.
two up and two down. And I think it's important that we don't just practice those things in one way. We try to look at them from a variety of different places. And I think it's important that that a student realizes the potential of those very simple things, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
sometimes I like play thirds, but then I have my horn here. Like, if you really think about like some combinations of things, right? If you in E flat major on tenor, right? If we play thirds, right? Then the next
Mhm.
mode of the scale would be F, right? Now let's say, oh, I'm going to do diatonic triad from there, right? The next mode of the major scale, E flat G. Well, now I'm going to play a seventh chord, right?
Mm,
It's a pretty
mhm.
cool lick, but it is all based on fundamental material. right?
Right. Right.
And that is and what that does is that really outlines the sound of E flat major, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Because all we're doing is playing a little fragment from the first mode of E flat major. The second mode is like an in between, and then it ends on like that third mode.
And it's
Now,
also developing a lot of flexibility in terms of like your groupings of notes. You know, if we always group in twos or fours, now we're grouping in twos, threes, fours, and whatever else we want to do. So
right.
that's fantastic.
And then if you take that as a framework, right, basic foundational material, well, what else could we do to make it different? Well, let's take that F minor triad in the middle, and instead of playing that ascending, let's play that descending.
Cool.
Right? Still
Mm.
kind of sounds the same, but there's a little twist on it.
Yeah.
What can we do to the G minor at the end? Well, if we follow Bird or Barry Harris or any of those people, we take this G minor triad and we displace the second note by an octave.
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
Now we have a line, right? That
Beautiful.
it's fundamental material. Now,
Mm.
that is my outline for E flat major. Well, what happens if we have F Dorian? Well, now we're going to do that same process, but now I'm going to play the third starting on F, right? The next mode would be that G minor triad, right? And then it would go to A flat major, right? And then
Yeah.
we take that same process, right? Or the Barry Harris, right?
Yeah.
And to me, that actually outlines the sound of F minor.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do the same thing now with B flat 7,
Yeah. And
right?
I love the way you're thinking about this too. And what you said earlier really is holding true. Like you said, I like to play pretty things. People should be playing pretty things. And you're talking about Barry Harris, and that's one thing that always strikes me about Barry is that on his videos when he's sitting at the piano and he's coming up with something and he's using all his rules and everything, what does he say when he comes up with something that he really likes? Oh, that's pretty. It's
Right.
not about the chromaticism and the inner workings or whatever. What is he concerned with at the end of the day? Oh, that's a pretty phrase. That's a keeper, right? And that's I don't know. It's just striking me as being such a huge disciple of Barry Harris. Like that word "pretty." That's really important.
And I think that that word pretty can also be associated with clarity. It's the one
Mm,
thing that try to preach to my students all the time. We want to have clarity in everything. We want to have clarity in the ride cymbal when we're playing that, right? We want to have clarity in the voicing, but within our lines, we want the lines to be clear. We want to make sure that it has a motion, a shape, a direction. Now, using these fundamental materials, that actually then teaches a student how to build shapes too, right? Because we started with a small shape, a middle shape, and a big shape.
mhm.
And we can try to experiment with as many combinations as we want. We could have started with the three note function triplet, doing the two note thing in the middle with the four note thing on the outside,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And there's so many things, and so I feel like that I'm kind of trying to do my technical work in the same sense of like, if I'm going to practice my technical work, I don't have time to waste. I don't have
right.
time to set aside to play technical stuff. I want to play some technical stuff, but then also realize that all of this stuff has value, because we all come to a point where our licks and lines start to run out, and we have to have filler material. For lack of a better term, it's kind of like improvisational duct tape,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So we have
absolutely.
to work on these duct tape related uh, ideas, if that makes any sense, you know?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Absolutely. So, how has your process kind of like changed over the years with starting to realize some of these things? What does your practice and what you consider and what you think is important and what you actually spend your time doing, how has that changed over the years?
Um, I think it has gotten simpler as I have gotten older.
Awesome.
I think when we're young, we just feel like that we're running out of time, right? And we are practicing all this stuff and all these people that we listen to, and the generation that I really grew up listening to, Brecker and Bob Berg and all that kind of stuff, and trying to like get those lines in there. And it's just like the older I get, it's like, oh man, how can I develop a three-note melody now?
Right,
Right?
right.
And it's just trying to simplify, and I'm striving for clarity all the time within my playing. Right? I want to make sure that the harmony is clear, so that way when I abandon the harmony, people then know, okay, well, this guy is clearly doing it on purpose. And I think I'm fortunate in some of the people that I play with here in Los Angeles. We are all kind of like-minded in that music is about the collective breath. It is about melody. It is about unify. It's about playing colors, right? So I guess maybe that's the easiest way to describe it, is that I think about the music and the little harmonic device as being some sort of color that I can put
Mm.
in there. I don't know if I necessarily feel lines as being, I mean, they have color, but three notes and developed and things like that, I just think is it just makes it fun to like see how how much you can kind of stretch this little thing. I just don't like sitting down and working on licks and lines and doing that all day. I want to get in there. I want to free association, work on some stuff, and kind of see what stuff develops.
That's beautiful. And there's a couple of things that come to mind with what you just said. My first one is sort of, let's take a student that is maybe just getting started and is having so much trouble just keeping track of where they are, like, or even just keeping track of like, all right, what notes are a good place to start from, over
Mhm.
these changes? How did they get from that point of like this? I mean, I've been there before, like real overthinking, right? You're worried about the rules. You're worried about, I don't want to play a note that sounds bad. That's your first concern, right?
Mhm.
How do you get from that point to thinking a little bit more impressionistically, for lack of a better term, where you are actually thinking about colors? Um, Now, I know that's like a huge question that we could talk about for hours on
Right.
end, but what does that sort of path look like to get from very rudimentary thinking to being able to think about what you said, which is color palette?
Well, I think if I had a student that was trying to figure this stuff out, right? And it's like, instead of like just giving a bunch of eighth note lines or an etude or something over a tune, and really trying to teach them how to kind of create their own thing.
Mhm.
I do like this little system of, can I have a student go through a tune and simply play up 1, 2, 3 of the scale,
Mm.
right? And then it forces them to da do dee da do dee, right? You do something like that.
Okay.
They can play into the scale from beat 4, right? So we land on a note, they can start it right on the downbeat. I want them to also do that same system where it's like 3 to 5. I want them to do that same system where it's 5 to 7.
Mm.
They can do that same system from 7 to 9, or they can go 7 up to the root again with a chromatic thing in between. So
Cool.
that in itself is a very simple melody, right? The
Hmm.
next step in like kind of the impressionistic concept is, now can you take that thing, instead of playing 1, 2, 3, can you play a little thing on 1, 2, 3 and then voice lead to the next chord, and that might actually be 7, 8, 9.
Mm.
And now you're taking
Okay.
these things that might be stacked like this, right? And you're trying to find these smaller things where you're utilizing different notes of the chord to move something in maybe more of a linear type way. So there's a direction or something to it. So
Cool.
That's to me how I would start it. We got to learn the fundamental stuff, then let's go by and figure out a guide tone line, right? And then we're going to build that little melody thing from that guide tone line.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a great way to think about it, and it's something that somebody could do kind of right away, which I really love. So I guess my last question is, you've sort of explained your process, how you would show it to students, and you've said like you're not really into taking licks and just learning them verbatim. It's more about figuring out colors, figuring out the simplest thing that you can do that can lead you to a really pretty melody. Um, I guess a thing that I see with a lot of my students is that they don't spend enough time in the practice room exploring. It's like they're like you said, they're so concerned about like what they should be doing that they're having trouble finding their voice by simply just going out on a limb. And I always like to tell them, being in the practice room, it's a really low stakes thing. That's the beauty of being in the practice room by yourself. You can
Mm-hmm.
sound like crap and nobody's going to even know. So what does that look like for you? Like, are you spending a lot of your time in the practice room exploring? And what's your philosophy on that? Should people be doing that?
Absolutely. I think, and like I said, sometimes it's less about the exploration of a tune and just the exploration of a key.
Mm,
Just get a kid to like get in there and just say, you know what, just play on E flat major.
mm,
Just really start to realize what kind of things you can come up with within that sound and remove the anxiety of I got to play this and now I got to move here and then I got to move here. We have to teach people to then be creative within one framework. And
beautiful.
I think the nature of where the age and when I grew up, which is you're probably similar. It's like as a kid, I would go outside with my Star Wars figures and in the dirt, and then I'd build a thing. And
Hmm.
kids don't do that this day. It's like give me a
Right.
device and things like that. So we're losing a lot of that kind of exploration and trying to just get in there with no fear and just like I'm going to make up my own thing today. I'm going to make up my own game, or I'm going to invent a universe that I'm going to play with my figures in.
Hmm.
Um, and
Yeah.
so I think if we could kind of eliminate the fear of all of this chordal stuff and say like, no, listen, we're gonna put on a track or no track, and let's just play within a key and see what kind of happens. And then if you have a student that, it might be an interesting process to have a student come to your house, we're going to jam in this key today and like really listen, right? And as soon as a student plays something, stop. Okay, check that out, right? What is that? And then we realize, oh, check it out. It's this little thing. Well, let's see if we can expand on that. You created this, you played this. Now let's see how we can run it through this key. And then you have this longer piece of melodic material that is based on something smaller, So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's how I kind of would approach some of those things, because that's the way I approach things myself.
Yeah.
I'm still an 8-year old going out and trying to play in the dirt.
Yeah.
you know
Yeah, and that's one of the beautiful things about jazz. I'll never forget meeting James Moody when he was like in his late 70s and hearing him practice, and it was like, oh, he's still exploring. He's still trying to find new things. He's still trying to figure out new sounds. That's just really the beauty of this art form.
Yes, I had a day with Moody that forever changed my
Oh,
life. He
cool.
was about 78 years old or something like. I have a picture of him here in my office. I have a picture of him in my office at work, and I've never been more inspired by one man on one day than that. And
That is
just
beautiful.
absolutely a beautiful human being. And
Yeah.
funny thing is he gave me a lesson, and I after the lesson was over, I asked him how much money I needed to pay him for the lesson, and he
Hmm.
wouldn't take my money. He said the only thing that I have to do is to keep passing it on. So
Wow.
and I learned that very young, and so that's what I try to do in my pursuit in jazz education is to try to demystify some things and to try to pass it along the best I possibly can.
Well, man, you're doing a great job of it. I find everything that you put out there into the world super inspiring. I just love your playing and I love your thoughts and philosophy on this stuff. You have a lot of, can you tell people kind of where to go to find more of your stuff? I know you have a lot of great stuff on your website and a lot of it's like free. You've got some Bergonzi stuff. I know you've got your improvisation book that I bought a while ago, I work out of all the time. Can you tell people where to go to find your things?
Yeah, if you just go to jeffellwood.net, there's links to everything. I have a book on developing bebop lines. I started writing some. I started doing some etudes, but they're actually kind of like more transcriptions of my own playing, which was quite an eye-opening process to see
Yeah.
what kind of things I do all the time and what things I hate in my playing. But then there are some links, I think, on the etudes where there are some free etudes to download on that site as well. I did do a thing with my bebop book through Jazz Video Lessons, that
Oh, cool.
website, and I did like a 2 hour presentation on how all the stuff from the book kind of works. So if anybody is interested in the book and the masterclass together, you can get it on Jazz Video Lessons. Um,
Awesome.
yeah, and so yeah, and then there's lots of free stuff up there, and Bergonzi, that was a labor of love, just
Yeah.
putting all of his music into Finale, which is free. I did the music of Dick Oates too, but
Oh, cool.
Dick wants some. I don't think it's very much to purchase that book through his website. So yeah, there's lots of resources there, and I released an album a few years ago. If anybody wants to listen to that, the Sounds Around the House, that's on all the streaming platforms.
Beautiful, man. Well, thank you so much for doing this. We'll link to all that stuff below the video, so make sure you go and check that out and support Jeff's stuff. And thanks for being here, man. A really enlightening conversation.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it.